The message appeared in the family group chat on a Tuesday morning. I was making coffee when my phone buzzed. Uncle Vincent had typed something. My stomach tightened before I even read it. This family needs to stop wasting resources on dead weight. Some people contribute nothing, but expect everything. I'm done watching someone drain our legacy. You're useless, Jordan. Completely useless. This is why nobody respects you. I'm removing you from family decisions and, frankly, from this group. You've embarrassed us long enough. 43 people in that chat. Not one person defended me. Not my mother. Not my cousins who had helped through college. Not my aunts who I'd driven to doctor's appointments for years. The silence that followed hurt worse than the words. I stared at the screen, my coffee going cold. Then Uncle Vincent's next message came through. Consider yourself cut off. Effective immediately. 5 minutes later, I was removed from the group. I was 32 years old, and my entire family had just watched me get erased. My hand shook as I set my phone down. But underneath the shock, something else stirred. Something calm. Something that felt a lot like clarity. I sat alone in my apartment that evening, and the quiet was deafening. No phone call from my mother asking what happened. No text from my favorite cousin checking on me. No apology from anyone who'd sat silent while Uncle Vincent tore me apart. That's when the reality hit hardest. I wasn't just hurt by what he said. I was hurt by what everyone else didn't say. I thought about all the years, the unpaid help, the late-night conversations, the money I'd loaned out that was never returned, the family events I'd organized from scratch, the car I'd fixed for my cousin Marcus without charging him a penny. All of it forgotten in 30 seconds. All of it dismissed as contributing nothing. I pulled out my laptop and opened an old folder. Inside were documents I'd kept for years. Not because I planned to use them, but because I'd always believed in being organized. Receipts, agreements, emails, photographs, records of promises made and broken, records of help given and never acknowledged. I realized something sitting there in the dark. I've been so busy proving my worth to them that I'd never stopped to verify what I actually owned. Not just objects, not just money, but real things, legal things, things with my name on them. I'd never bother to check because I thought family meant you didn't need proof. Tomorrow, I decided I would verify everything. Let me back up and tell you who I was before Tuesday. I was the helpful one, the peacemaker, the person who showed up without being asked. When my grandfather was sick 15 years ago, I moved into his house for 6 months and took care of him. Uncle Vincent visited twice. I cooked. I cleaned. I managed his medications. I held his hand at night when he couldn't sleep. Nobody asked me to do it. I just did it because that's what family does. When my cousin needed money for business school, I co-signed the loan. When my aunt needed someone to help her pack up her child at home after the divorce, I took a week off work. When a family reunion fell apart, because nobody planned it, I organized the whole thing in 3 weeks from scratch. I never asked for credit. I never demanded recognition. I was the one people called when things got hard, and the one they forgot about when things got easy. My job paid well. I'd worked my way up from nothing to become a contracts analyst. It meant I understood agreements, timelines, and fine print. It meant I noticed things other people missed. I've been helping people navigate paperwork and promises for a decade. But somehow, I never applied those skills to my own family. I just trusted. Uncle Vincent had always been different from the rest of us. Where we were quiet, he was loud. Where we were cautious, he was bold. He'd made money in real estate, and that money had made him powerful. He'd taken over family decisions around 15 years ago, right after grandfather died. Nobody had formally voted him into that position. He just started acting like he was in charge, and everyone went along with it. The thing about people like Uncle Vincent is they don't become confident over time. They become confident the moment someone stops questioning them. He'd rewritten family narratives. He'd made himself the hero of stories where he'd barely shown up. He'd spoken about my grandfather's wishes like he'd known them personally when he'd barely visited in the final months. And I'd watched him do all of this from the side, too kind to correct him, too respectful to challenge him. I'd let him control the conversation because he was so comfortable controlling it. I'd watched him take credit for things other people had done. I'd heard him dismiss people without consequence. He was used to being the loudest voice in the room, and he'd never met anyone who bothered to be louder back. That was about to change. but he didn't know it yet. The first time Uncle Vincent crossed a line I actually noticed was 3 years ago. We were at a family dinner, and he was talking about the family estate, grandfather's property, the 30 acres outside the city with the old house, the barn, the gardens. It was beautiful land, worth a lot of money. Uncle Vincent was describing his plans for it. He wanted to develop it, turn it into a commercial property. He was talking about it like it was his decision to make. I asked a simple question: who actually owns it now? He looked at me like I'd asked something stupid. The family does, obviously. No, I said carefully. Who's the legal owner? Whose name is on the deed? He waved his hand dismissively. That's not important right now. What matters is my vision for the property. But it was important. I could feel it. So after dinner, I excused myself and went home. I made some calls. I pulled some records, and I found something that made my breath stop. The deed was in my name. I didn't even remember how it happened. Years ago, when grandfather was still healthy, he'd asked me to help him organize his legal documents. He'd said something about wanting to simplify things, wanting to put the estate in someone's name who would respect it and keep it safe. I thought he meant help him file the paperwork. I hadn't realized he'd actually put the property directly in my name as a gift. No conditions, no restrictions, just a blank deed with my signature and his, filed in the county records office. I'd forgotten about it completely. It had been buried in old files, tucked away in a folder I rarely opened. But it was real. It was legal. It was mine. After that discovery, I began to understand something about kindness. Kindness is not a weakness unless you decide it is. I'd always thought of my helpfulness as a strength, but I let other people define what it meant. To them, it didn't mean I was strong. It meant I was easy. It meant I wouldn't fight back. It meant they could take what I offered and then push for more. Uncle Vincent started making bigger demands after that dinner. Nothing obvious, just little things. He'd ask me to handle family finances. He'd expect me to handle all the paperwork. He'd make announcements about family decisions without consulting me first. Once, he told my mother I'd agreed to sell a piece of the family property when I'd said absolutely no such thing. Each time, I stayed calm. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse him of anything. I just quietly corrected the record and moved on. I think he mistook that for acceptance. I think he saw my calm as confirmation that I didn't care enough to fight. He didn't understand that I was collecting something far more valuable than his attention. I was collecting evidence. I've always believed in being organized. After I discovered the deed, I started documenting everything. Every conversation with Uncle Vincent. Every email where he overstepped. Every verbal agreement he made and then contradicted later. Every time he spoke about family property like it was his to control. Every time he took credit for decisions that weren't his to make. I bought a notebook and started keeping records. Times. Dates. What was said. Who heard it? I took screenshots of text messages. I saved emails. I made notes about phone conversations right after they happened, while the details were fresh. I wasn't doing this to be vindictive. I was doing it because I understood the power of documentation. In my job, I'd seen how contracts protect people. I realized that proof protects people too. I also did something else. I contacted a lawyer. A quiet consultation, nothing formal. I asked about the deed, about my rights, about what it meant that I owned the property, and Uncle Vincent was making decisions about it without my permission. The lawyer was very clear. I had complete legal authority over that land. Whatever Uncle Vincent was planning, he couldn't do it without me. That knowledge sat inside me like a secret. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't hint at it. I just lived my life, helped where I could, and stayed silent about what I knew. The damage to my reputation had been happening for months before I even realized it. Uncle Vincent was reshaping the family narrative. He'd started telling people that I was irresponsible, that I couldn't be trusted with important matters, that my help came with strings attached. He'd rewritten history, making himself the generous one and making me look like I was always expecting something in return. I'd hear these stories secondhand from cousins who were uncomfortable repeating them, but felt obligated to warn me. Uncle Vincent is telling people you overcharge him for help with his taxes. He's saying you expected money for organizing the reunion. He mentioned that you're jealous of his success and try to undermine him. None of it was true. All of it was poisoning how people saw me. I could feel the shift in how my family treated me. They were warmer to me at first, then distant, then almost cold. They'd invite me to things out of obligation, then look uncomfortable when I arrived. I was watching my reputation die in real time, and nobody seemed to care that the stories weren't true. That's when I understood something dangerous about Uncle Vincent. He wasn't just taking control. He was systematically destroying anyone who might question him. And the best part, from his perspective, was that nobody could prove he was lying. It was just his word against theirs. And his word carried weight because he had money and confidence, and nobody else had bothered to keep records. The group chat explosion happened exactly when I wasn't expecting it, which I think was the point. I was at work when it started. Someone had posted a family photo in the chat. A nice one. Everyone looked happy. Uncle Vincent's comment came next. This is what family should be. United. Supportive. Not divided by jealousy and greed. He was referring to me. Everyone understood he was referring to me. The comments came fast. Aunts expressing their agreement. Cousins adding their own subtle criticisms. And I sat at my desk, reading each one, feeling the weight of being ganged up on by the people I loved most. Then Uncle Vincent escalated. That's when he called me useless. That's when he called me a drain. That's when he announced to the entire family that I was being cut off. And that's when nobody defended me. I read those messages in a gray cubicle with fluorescent lights humming above my head. I felt the shock. I felt the betrayal. But I also felt something else. I felt the moment my restraint ended. I felt the moment I decided that this was enough. I didn't respond to any of the messages. I didn't cry at my desk. I didn't call my mother in anger. I just closed the chat and opened my email. I found my lawyer's contact information, and I typed, "It's time. I'm ready to move forward." The next day, someone reached out to me privately. It was my cousin Aaron. He'd been quiet in the family chat, which meant something. Aaron was usually quick to agree with Uncle Vincent, quick to laugh at his jokes, quick to back up whatever he said. But he was also observant. He noticed things. "That didn't sit right with me," he texted. "The way he came after you. I've known you our whole lives. You've never been the person he described. What's actually going on?" I appreciated the question. I appreciated that at least one person was willing to question the narrative. But I wasn't ready to explain yet. I just told Aaron that I'd be in touch soon, and that he should keep his eyes open. He asked what that meant. I didn't answer directly. Instead, I asked him a question. "Do you know who owns grandfather's estate?" The silence that came back told me everything. Aaron didn't know. Nobody knew. Nobody had ever questioned it. They'd all just assumed Uncle Vincent was in charge because he acted like he was in charge. They'd never checked the actual facts. "Why?" Aaron finally texted back. "Just curious." I replied. "Check the county records if you want. It's public information." I knew what he'd find when he looked. I knew exactly what the deed would say. And I knew that once Aaron found that information, he wouldn't be able to keep it to himself. Information like that travels fast through families. Within a few days, everyone would know. And then the conversation would be very different. While Aaron was searching county records and the rest of my family was probably forgetting I existed, I met with my lawyer. Her name was Patricia, and she was sharp as glass. She'd reviewed everything I had. The deed. The documentation of Uncle Vincent's overreach. The emails where he'd promised to do things with the property without consulting me. The photographs of property improvements he'd commissioned without asking permission. He's been operating under the assumption that he has authority he doesn't have, Patricia explained. Legally, he has no standing to make any decisions about that land. Not one. And anything he's done with the property, he's done without permission from the actual owner. That's a liability for him. I felt something shift inside my chest. For years, I'd been the one questioning myself. I've been the one wondering if maybe Uncle Vincent was right, if maybe I was being difficult, if maybe I was overreacting. Hearing Patricia confirm that I had legitimate authority was validating in a way I didn't expect. "What do you want to do?" she asked. That was a good question. I could have him removed from the property management immediately. I could sue him for any unauthorized improvements. I could force a family meeting and demand respect. I could have simply asserted my ownership and made his life difficult. But that wasn't who I was. So I told Patricia something different. I want to give him a chance to make this right. But I won't be ready if he doesn't. She nodded like she understood. Smart. Let's prepare for both scenarios. Uncle Vincent did exactly what I predicted he would do. A week after the group chat incident, my mother called me. She sounded nervous. Your uncle wants to have a family meeting, she said. About the property. Of course he did. Aaron had found the deed. The information had spread through the family like wildfire. And now Uncle Vincent was panicking. He was going to try to control the narrative before it got away from him. He was going to call a meeting and make some kind of announcement, probably something designed to minimize the importance of the deed or reframe what it meant. He was acting exactly like I'd predicted because he didn't understand that I'd been preparing for this the entire time. When I asked my mother, Saturday, at the house, the estate house. He wants everyone there. I felt my heart rate pick up. The estate, the land, the property that was legally mine that he'd been treating like it was his. He wanted to have this conversation on that ground, probably thinking that being there would give him an advantage. He was going to try to assert dominance in the place where he felt most powerful. He had no idea how much he'd already lost. I spent Friday night going through every single piece of documentation one more time. The deed, the email chains, the text messages, the notes from my lawyer, the photographs of property changes he'd made without permission, the list of promises he'd made to various family members that he'd already broken. All of it was real. All of it was documented. All of it was going to matter tomorrow. I wasn't nervous. That was the strange part. I thought I would be. I thought I'd feel anxious or angry or some kind of strong emotion. But mostly I felt calm. I felt ready. I felt like I was finally stepping into something I'd been preparing for without even knowing it. The next morning, I put on my best clothes. Not fancy clothes, just clothes that felt professional. Clothes that said I was taking this seriously. I drove out to the estate, the place where I'd spent so many childhood summers, the place where I'd cared for my grandfather, the place that legally belonged to me, but where I'd always felt like I didn't quite belong. When I arrived, the family was already there. 30 people. My aunts, my uncles, my cousins, my mother. They were scattered around a main house, some of them looking guilty, some of them looking angry, some of them looking curious about what was about to happen. Uncle Vincent stood in the center of the room like a general surveying his troops. He didn't see me at first, but when he did, his expression changed. For just a second, I saw something flicker across his face. Fear. He was afraid of me now. I called this meeting, Uncle Vincent announced, because there seems to be some confusion about the family property. His voice was smooth, controlled, like he was already winning. Apparently, there's been some paperwork confusion going back years. But the important thing is that we, as a family, have a responsibility to this land. And I think we all agree that I'm the best person to oversee the responsibility. I watched him. He was trying to reframe this, try to make it seem like the deed was some kind of accident, some kind of paperwork mistake, when the reality was very different. Aaron spoke first, my cousin who'd quietly checked the records. The deed isn't a confusion, he said. It's clear. It has Jordan's name on it. Uncle Vincent's jaw tightened. The deed is outdated. It was intended as a symbolic gesture years ago, not an actual. The deed is legal, I said. My voice was calm, steady, and it was not a mistake. Grandfather was very clear about what he was doing. The room went quiet. Everyone was looking at me now. I could see my mother's face. She looked shocked, like she was seeing me for the first time in months. I have emails, I continued, from grandfather explaining exactly why he put the property in my name. He was very specific. He wanted someone who would respect it and maintain it, not use it as a business opportunity without consulting the family. Uncle Vincent's face was turning red. You're rewriting history, he said loudly. You've always been obsessed with power. This is about control. No, I said, this is about truth. I pulled out the documentation Patricia had prepared for me. In the past 3 years, I said, looking at the papers, there have been 17 significant decisions made about this property. Uncle Vincent made all of them without consulting me, the legal owner. He commissioned renovations. He negotiated with developers. He made verbal agreements with outside companies, none of which he had the authority to make. I showed them the emails. I showed them the photographs. I showed them the timeline of decisions that affected the property without my consent. I spoke calmly, factually, like I was presenting information in a meeting at work, not confronting my entire family about betrayal. Additionally, I continued, there have been several false statements made about my character and my intentions. I kept quiet about those statements because I believed in family unity. But silence, I've learned, is often a choice that other people misinterpret. Uncle Vincent tried to interrupt. This is ridiculous. You're being vindictive. I'm being honest, I replied. There's a difference. Uncle Vincent's next move was predictable. He tried to get the family on his side. He appealed to emotion. He said things like, I've only ever wanted what was best for this family. He tried to make me look like the villain. He said I was using legal technicalities to undermine him, that I was being petty about paperwork, that I was destroying family unity out of spite. It might have worked if the facts weren't against him, but the facts were very clear. The documentation was undeniable. And most importantly, Aaron was there with his own printed copies of the deed, and my mother was finally starting to ask questions. How long have you known this? My mother asked me quietly. A few years, I admitted. Grandfather explained it to me when he was organizing his documents. I didn't think it would matter. I trusted that everyone would work together to do what was right. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Regret, maybe, or disappointment in herself for not defending me in the group chat, or realization that she believed Uncle Vincent's version of me for months without ever checking to see if it was true. I explained my plans for the property very calmly. I've had a lot of time to think about what Grandfather wanted, I said. He wanted the land preserved. He wanted the family to benefit from it. He wanted it managed responsibly. Those were his 3 explicit requests when he explained this to me. I looked around the room. I'm not going to use this property as a commercial development. I'm not going to rent it out to the highest bidder. I'm going to preserve it. I'm going to create a family trust that generates income for everyone. And I'm going to ensure that it's managed ethically and sustainably. It was a good plan. Patricia had helped me develop it weeks ago. It was fair. It was generous. It honored Grandfather's wishes. And most importantly, it was my decision to make, and nobody could take that away from me. Uncle Vincent's face darkened. You're going to destroy the family's financial future out of spite. No, I said. I'm going to honor Grandfather's wishes. That's what families should do. The moment came when I showed them the full extent of what I'd learned. Not just about the property, but about Uncle Vincent himself. Patricia had helped me compile information about some of his business practices. Nothing illegal, exactly, but ethically questionable. Deals he'd made where he'd benefited far more than the other parties. Promises he'd made to people that he'd broken. Loans he'd given to family members with terms that were secretly unfavorable. I'm not trying to destroy you, I said. I'm trying to establish boundaries. And I'm doing that by being honest about who you are and what you've done. The room was silent. Some of my family members looked uncomfortable. Others looked angry. But they all looked at Uncle Vincent differently now. The illusion was cracking. You're a coward, he spat at me, hiding behind paperwork and accusations. I'm a realist, I replied. I'm someone who finally understands that being kind doesn't mean being a doormat. And I'm someone who's going to move forward on my terms, not yours. The aftermath was strange and sudden. People kept coming up to me, not to apologize exactly, but to reassess. My aunts asked me about my plans for the property. My cousins asked if they could help with the trust. Even my mother, after some time, asked if we could talk privately. I'm sorry, she said. Just those 3 words. But they carried weight. I hugged her. I know, and I forgive you. But I need you to understand something. I'm not the person Uncle Vincent described. I never was. And I needed you to know that, even if it didn't matter to the rest of the family. She nodded. She understood. Uncle Vincent left the meeting early. He didn't say anything. He just collected his things and walked out. I watched him go and felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction, exactly. Not happiness, but something like peace. Like I'd finally released something heavy that I'd been carrying for a long time. The logical consequences started immediately. Uncle Vincent's reputation in the community took a hit. People who'd been considering business deals with him started asking questions. Banks that had been considering loans started reconsidering. Family connections that had strengthened his position started weakening. I didn't orchestrate any of it. I didn't spread rumors or tell stories. I just told the truth when people asked, and the truth was apparently enough to make people think twice about working with him. Within 3 months, he'd lost 2 major business deals. Within 6 months, he'd had to downsize. Within a year, he was operating at a fraction of his former scale. Not because I destroyed him, but because he destroyed his own credibility, and without credibility, his power evaporated. More importantly, I realized something about how power works. It's not actually about money or confidence or being the loudest in the room. It's about trust. And once people stop trusting you, it doesn't matter how loud you are. Everyone stops listening. I made a choice about how to handle the property that surprised some people. Instead of using it purely for my own benefit, I created the trust exactly like I'd promised. I established a legal structure that would generate income for the family while preserving grandfather's vision. I hired professionals to manage it. I made sure it was transparent and fair. Some of my family members probably thought I'd change my mind once I had full control. They probably expected me to punish Uncle Vincent by cutting off everyone else. But that wasn't who I was. I was generous because that was my nature, not because anyone had forced me to be. And I was going to stay that way. What changed was something different. I was generous on my terms now. I gave because I wanted to, not because I felt obligated. I helped because I chose to, not because I felt guilty if I didn't. I set boundaries because I understood that boundaries weren't cruel. They were necessary. That was the real power. Aaron played a strange role in all of this. He reached out about a month after the family meeting. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I believed Uncle Vincent's version of you for a long time. I should have questioned it. You checked the records when it mattered," I replied. "That's what counts." We became closer after that. Aaron started helping me with the property management. He became one of my trusted advisors. He turned out to be thoughtful and honest in a way that the rest of my family hadn't quite managed. We all need people like that. People who are willing to look at the actual facts instead of just accepting the narrative they're being told. Other family members came around more slowly. Some never really apologized. Some just pretended the whole thing had never happened. But most of them eventually started treating me differently. They started respecting me, not out of fear, but because they'd finally seen who I actually was. Uncle Vincent eventually disappeared for most of my life. He didn't make a dramatic exit. He just gradually became less present at family events. Then he stopped coming altogether. I heard through the grapevine that he'd moved to a different city, that he'd started over with a new business, that he was telling people that the family had betrayed him. I felt sad about it, honestly, not because I missed him, but because he couldn't understand what had actually happened. He couldn't accept that his actions had consequences. He couldn't see that nobody had destroyed him but himself. The last I heard, he was doing okay. Not as well as before, but okay. He lost power, but he was still alive. He was still functional. He just lost the illusion that he could do whatever he wanted without anyone questioning him. A year after everything changed, I stood on the estate property and looked at what had become of it. The house had been restored carefully. The gardens were being maintained by people who cared about them. The barn was being converted into a community space where family could gather. The land was beautiful again in a way that had nothing to do with commercial potential and everything to do with actual care. I'd stepped into a new role, not just as the owner of the property, but as the steward of grandfather's legacy. And I discovered something surprising. Responsibility felt different when it was chosen rather than imposed. I'd also changed jobs. I'd moved into a position that let me help other families navigate similar situations. I got to help people understand their legal rights and their family obligations. I got to show people that knowledge and preparation were more powerful than anger. The most important thing I learned through all of this was about strength. Strength doesn't look like yelling or fighting or demanding respect. Real strength is quiet. It's patient. It's prepared. It's the ability to stand calmly in front of people and tell them the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. It's the willingness to document, to verify, and to take your time. Strength is choosing kindness because that's who you are, not because you're afraid of what will happen if you don't. Grandfather had seen that strength in me when he put the property in my name. He'd seen someone who would protect something valuable, not exploit it. He'd seen someone worth trusting with a legacy. It had taken me years to understand what he'd understood immediately. I don't hate Uncle Vincent. I don't think about him much at all anymore. He was just someone who confused volume with authority, and when the volume stopped matching, everything fell apart. He was a lesson in how fragile power really is when it's not built on anything real. Today, I live a life that's completely different from the one I was living before that Tuesday when I was called useless. I have authority now. I have respect. I have a family that treats me with the kind of care I'd always given to them. But the most valuable thing I have is understanding. I understand how power really works. I understand that justice doesn't come from revenge. I understand that patience and documentation are more powerful than anger. And I understand that sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is being cut off by the people you thought mattered most. Because that's when you finally discover what you're actually capable of. That's when you discover who you actually are.